Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'll welcome you to the October work session. Welcome those that are in the audience and those that are watching online. We're glad to have you. I'll ask the clerk if he'll call the roll.
Mrs. Amos,
Here.
Mr. Reed,
Here.
Mr. Dwyer,
Here.
Mr. Parrott, Mr. Vincent,
Here.
Mr. Hunter, Mr. Cole.
Here.
Okay, it's just a quick overview. We're going to have a discussion about the vacant town positions, funding and wages, any other comments, and then we're going into closed session to interview candidates for clerk of council, and after that there'll be no additional action today. So with that, the first item is the discussion of the vacant town positions and the funding, wages, salary increases. Mr. Davis?
Mayor, I guess I should give a little bit of a brief history of how we're here, if that's what you would like.
Yes, please.
So we have been looking at this for quite some time of vacancies that we've had in the police department and also in public works, I may add. And at the previous council meeting, we talked about bus drivers for the Farmville area bus. And they came up to bring it to the Finance Committee to discuss further the police department and public works positions and the funding needs. Both areas we're having trouble finding qualified employees at what we currently start off in those pay ranges. For the police department, we've also talked to some other towns similar to us, and it was actually a meeting between the vice mayor, the mayor, and myself, and some of those towns. And it came to a conclusion that probably in the near future, most places are going to have to start uncertified people to be competitive at the $44,000 to $45,000 a year salary range. And so at the Finance Committee meeting at the end of last week, they're looking at both public works and police, but for this meeting, they asked that I get the police done, and then hopefully, well, definitely by next week, we'll have the other one. The goal is to have that one completed, and maybe we can have a further discussion of all of them. But for today, in front of you, you have the police salaries. And this is to take into account, we start at 45, and if you notice, it's 45, 11, 20, because that's how we can get the payroll to make it an even. It doesn't work so well in dollars and cents, even cents at 45,000. Anyway, this shows you that if we start positions at that amount, that and then take the ones that are vacant, and then bump those up from what our current salary is, $38,250. If we move it to 45 and some change, that's 17.7% increase. So in order to make the other employees in that department have the same rate of increase, so that we do not have some of the compression and other issues from the beginning, you'll see that that's under H, the new pay. That's what that would be for each of those positions that are to your left. The next column, I, is the difference between the old and the new pay of within that position. And then there's another column just to give you some idea. We do have those that get paid work shift differential. So if you work evenings or midnights, then you get a differential higher than if you're a day shift person. The last column, K, is the percent that you need to think about as we go into next budget year of how we, when I show that we'll probably need to adjust our pay ranges from in other words, the minimum, mid, and high, because by this increase, that's the percentage compared to the max of the ranges at this point. And so we'd have to end up adjusting those max ranges, or people are going to max out pretty quick in the next few years. The long of my story is, when you add all the benefits and this pay adjustment together, it's about $295,000 to do.
What we're doing today is just giving council something to think about. We'll come back and have additional discussion at regular council meeting next week. And Mr. Davis will have the Public Works with basically bringing everything to a starting salary of approximately $15 an hour, I think is what we discussed.
Yeah, I mean, we could 15. There's a locality around us that I've found out that the minimum for CDL is 16. So I would say any $15,000 to $16,000. We might have to increase it for those CDL positions, the laborer 2. But yes, Mayor, I mean, the laborer 1, we could start the minimum of what you're saying at 15. So that one's going to be a little bit different than this, because there's a few others that we'd have to look at within that department area too, that we would have to increase. Like the equipment operator is traditionally a little bit higher salary than the laborer 2 because of the equipment they operate, and then the foreman. So you can't make it despairing against those people either, just like we tried to figure this out in the police department.
So what we're doing today is just giving you an idea. We're giving you the culture shock of this one alone will increase payroll for the police department roughly $300,000 a year. And then we talk about when we might implement it, whether it's immediate or January 1, and where Scott will move stuff around in the budget to pay for it. Questions?
There's also the phased approach that we can talk about, I think, next week, about,
Yeah,
do
we
we
did talk about that.
do the new ones now, and then in next budget year, we adjust all the other employee. I mean, there's different ways that we could do this instead of all at one time, if we can talk through all that.
Yeah, there are different approaches we've talked about taking that we can talk through. But this gives everybody some really good food for thought for the next week to kind of, and then, like I said, Public Works will follow. Any questions of Scott today? No one passed out. That's a good thing. Again, many of us are returning from the VML conference earlier this week, and again, salaries and the whole workforce was topics of conversation. And every locality is facing what we're facing. We're not in this alone. Every locality across the Commonwealth, particularly with police officers and other positions that require certain skills, it's very competitive. And I have always said and always wanted Farmville to be out front and on the leading edge. And so we're not quite there right now, and we need to get back to the position of being on the leading edge of all this. So, Mr. Davis, any other comments? You're next.
No, sir, I don't have anything else.
Staff, Madam Treasurer, Mr. Deputy Police, any comments before we go into closed session?
I just have one. I would next week, if you could, I have provided you with the copy of the new draft employee handbook manual that I'd like to seek approval for at the next meeting. And so, if you could review it, have any questions, feel free to ask me beforehand as well, if you want to, so I can have some of those answers for you.
Anybody else have anything before we go into closed session to conduct interviews? If not, Mr. Vincent?
Mr. Mayor, I move that the Farmville Town Council convene in closed meeting pursuant to the Code of Virginia in accordance with the provisions of paragraph A.1 of section 2.2-3711 for the interviews for the clerk of council position and the provisions of paragraph A.5 of section 2.2-3711 for discussion of economic incentives at the old Ruby Tuesday.
Motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. We will convene in the EOC room in closed session shortly. Thank you.